When we think about an older person falling, our minds usually go straight to the impact, right? The broken bone, the bruise. But today, we're going to talk about something else. We're going to dive into what happens in the minutes and sometimes hours after the fall. So, let me just ask you this straight up. What could possibly be more dangerous than the fall itself?
It's the stillness. That quiet moment when you realize you can't get back on your feet, that is the hidden danger. And honestly, it's often way more critical than the fall itself.
Now, this terrifying period of being stuck on the floor, it actually has a name in the medical world, and it's what this whole explainer is about. It's called the long lie. A long lie is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's that stretch of time, any significant time really, that a person spends on the floor after they've fallen, totally unable to get up or call for help on their own. We're not talking about just a few seconds to catch your breath. This is a state of complete and utter helplessness. So how often does this happen? Well, get this. The research shows that a staggering 1 in 8 older people who fall will end up lying on the floor for more than an hour. Just let that sink in. 60 minutes or even longer alone and unable to move. And being stuck on a cold floor for that long, it has absolutely devastating effects on the body. We're talking serious stuff here. Hypothermia, as body heat just leaches away, dehydration that can spiral into kidney failure, pressure ulcers, which are these awful sores that damage the skin. The body's own muscles can literally start to break down, releasing toxins into the blood. That's a condition called rhabdomyolysis. And of course, the risk of infections like pneumonia just skyrockets. But the damage, wow, it goes so much deeper than just the physical. This quote here says it all. It's this sudden, brutal realization of your own vulnerability. That feeling of helplessness, it can crush a person's self-esteem, spark a deep fear of living alone. And tragically, studies show it actually increases the chances of dying in the year after the event. So a long lie isn't just an incident, it's a full-blown medical crisis that leaves lasting scars. So what happens when someone finally finds them? When help arrives? Let's talk about the emergency response and what first responders do on the scene. It's a process called acute therapy. Okay, so when paramedics walk through that door, they have a mental checklist. 3 immediate priorities to fight the effects of that long lie. They've got to deal with the hypothermia, check the skin for damage, and figure out how dehydrated the person is. Now, this is really fascinating. When it comes to hypothermia, your first instinct might be to, rub their arms and legs, get the blood flowing. But that's exactly the wrong thing to do. If you raise their limbs, it can send a rush of cold, acidic blood back to the heart, and that can actually be fatal. So the goal for responders is to warm the core, the torso, very slowly and very carefully. And responders have to be like detectives. The person's skin, especially if there are pressure ulcers, gives them vital clues. It helps them figure out just how long that person has been on the floor, which in turn helps them gauge the risk of that dangerous muscle breakdown we talked about. That immediate response is obviously a lifesaver. But the real goal? To make sure a long lie never happens again. And that brings us to the first big piece of prevention: counseling and physical training. A lot of prevention really just starts with a simple conversation. Counseling can help someone face those really tough fears about becoming dependent on others and to be honest about their own risk of falling. It's all about empowering them, right? Letting them know what help is out there, giving them back a feeling of control, and, this is key, getting their family and caregivers in on the plan. A huge piece of the puzzle is physical training on how to get up from the floor. There are 2 main ways to teach this. One is forward chaining, where you learn the steps from the ground up. But the other method, backward chaining, actually has a higher success rate. You start from a standing position and learn the steps in reverse. It sounds a little weird, but it works because it builds confidence. Every step feels like a win, which makes people want to keep practicing. But let's be real. For some people, getting all the way back to a standing position just isn't possible. So does the training just stop? No way. The goal just shifts. It becomes about learning a different, but just as life-saving skill. How to move or crawl across the floor to get to a phone, an emergency button, or even just to a warm blanket to fight off the cold. All right, so besides personal training, there are tools out there that can make a massive difference. Let's look at the part that technology and, just as importantly, community can play in all of this. When it comes to tech, you've basically got 2 options. On one side, you have the high-tech stuff, wearable sensors or motion detectors in the house that can automatically sense a fall and call for help. The person doesn't have to do a thing. On the other side are the low-tech aids we're more familiar with, like an emergency call button or just a cell phone, but those rely on the person to actually be able to press the button.
But here's the thing, and it's a really human thing. Even with all this cool tech, a lot of people just don't use it. They worry about the cost, or about sensors invading their privacy, or maybe the device just seems too complicated. At the end of the day, the research shows that the biggest factor in whether someone will use any of these aids is simply whether they believe they are actually at risk of falling.
And that is exactly why technology can't be the only answer. Sometimes the best, most reliable safety net is, well, it's other people. Having friends, family, or neighbors who check in regularly, what researchers call social control systems, is so important. That simple daily phone call can be the thing that ensures if someone falls, they're not left alone for long. So, we've talked about emergency responses, prevention, training, tech. It sounds like we've got this all figured out, doesn't it? Well, not so fast. The research review that this explainer is based on found some pretty shocking gaps in what we actually know. Just look at this chart for a second. Researchers started with over 1,000 articles that seemed like they might be relevant. But after they filtered for studies that were specifically about how to treat a long lie, they were left with just 19. 19 studies. I mean, this one image just says it all, doesn't it? It shows how little focused research there is on this huge problem. And what we learned from those few studies is really about what we don't know. There is no standard, agreed-upon treatment plan for a long lie. It's shocking, but most research doesn't even make a distinction between a simple fall and one that leads to a long lie. And that deep psychological trauma, that feeling of helplessness, it's almost completely ignored in current treatment plans.
So where do we go from here? The study is pretty clear with its top recommendation. It has to be a team effort. Treatment can't just be a one-and-done thing at the hospital. You need a whole team, doctors, nurses, physical therapists, and yes, mental health support that follows the person all the way back to their home.
Which brings us right back to the beginning, doesn't it? Back to the conversation. This isn't just something for doctors to worry about. This is for all of us, for our parents, for our neighbors, for ourselves. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Knowing everything you know now, how can you start the conversation about a fall plan today?